Leave a comment where you are listening in the world. Please subscribe if you enjoy our content. Enjoy! I have two recentish ones. This will be long, sorry. Went on a date with a dude in January. First thing he said was, "Nice. You weren't lying in your pictures." We chatted for about an hour that seemed to last forever. I'll give you the main points. Asterisk, he said he felt it was pointless to be friends with women. That unless a woman added value to his life professionally or sexually, there was no reason to talk to us. I asked, so do you not feel like women have just intrinsic value by simply being fellow human beings on this planet? He got mad. Asterisk, he believes the earth is an apple shape, with energy flowing from the apple's anus, his words, up to the stem, and flowing back down and out through the anus again. Asterisk, at one point, he looked up at the night sky, and said, "Isn't it cool how you can see the reflection of the earth in the dome?" I said, "WT," and he went on to explain that there is no moon. We aren't seeing shadows on the moon either. The moon is just the reflection of the earth, and the shadows are the reflections of the continents. He's into power and control, and for sure thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Even him giving me directions to where we met up was a test. It was kind of confusing and complicated, and he commented that I was the first person to get it right without needing to call him for help when I showed up. I got major future cult leader vibes from him. Then I had another date later that same week. Guy and I had been talking for about a month, so I was really looking forward to it. I jokingly asked what shape he thought the earth was when we were waiting for our table at the restaurant. He said he'd researched evidence for both flat earth and globe earth, and asked me what shape I believed it was. I told it is 100% a globe. I studied astronomy for a minute. He knew that. Then he got weird and said he wasn't feeling it and didn't feel like sitting down to have dinner with me. Also said he didn't feel like I looked like my pictures, and basically called me ugly. Which is kinda crazy because I don't edit pics or use any filters, and every single other guy I've ever met through the apps has expressed surprise and relief that I either look exactly like my pics, and some have even said I look better than my pics, so buckle the fuck in. This was a rough one, and really stands out. So we had set up the date, and I told her I could meet closer to her since she mentioned she didn't drive. She insisted on going to the brewery I first suggested and mentioned that she could just take the train. I double-checked that this was okay, and she said she really wanted to try it. Well, on the day of the date, I get a call from her when I'm waiting at the brewery telling me that she got lost. She's at a close-by bus station, so I go to pick her up. Apparently the train didn't take her all the way to the brewery, and she had to take 3 buses. The date gets started, and it's actually going pretty well. We have a lot in common, and we're hitting it off. Then the craziness starts to show. She tells me that she has an altar at her apartment and loves to practice witchcraft, and talks about how her aunt could speak to spirits, and she inherited the gift. I'm just nodding along at this point. Then she tells me that she thinks it's super unfair that men can so easily get vasectomies, and that she tried to get sterilized at a hospital, and they refused to do it. I'm just like WTF at this point. I'm drinking water to sober up and get out of there and end the date. We finally finish up, and it's pretty late. I offer her a ride against my better judgment, because I didn't want her to have to take public transit or rideshare so late, and she says okay. When we get to her place, I realize she lives in a really not so nice area. There's no parking either, so she tells me to park on red. I'm just ready to leave at this point, but really needed some water. She gets me a water bottle and looks sad and expectant when I take it like she was disappointed that I wasn't going to kiss her. I kiss her and then peel out of there. Well, the craziness continues the next day when she blows up my phone asking me what I think about the star signs and astrology. I'm like I don't really know much about it, and this pisses her off. She keeps pressing me and telling me that if I don't learn about astrology, that she would put a curse on me. I ended up blocking her and never looking back. I'm probably cursed. Guy 1 seemed okayish, and I decided to meet. Before meeting he had texted, "Would we kiss?" And I said if things go that way then yes. So I asked to meet behind the mall, where it kinda is a parking spot with a few food carts around. The first thing I noticed when he walked across the street to me is his terrible sense of style, tattered flip-flops, a polo shirt that seemed dirty, ill-fit trousers, and his walk was terrible, dragged his feet while walking. So we walked a bit next by the canal towards a bench, and there were some people around too. He kept talking about, wait for it, his sexual experience like his first threesome, and how he doesn't really like it, his first receive of a BJ. I was getting repelled by the second. Anyway, we reached the bench and sat there, and I made sure I sat on the far end of the bench from him, and he asked, "Can we kiss?" I said no. I noticed there weren't as many people around as there was before, so I suggested we walk back to where we met, and kind of walked fast. He kept asking why I wouldn't kiss him, and TBH, he is one of those least groomed guys. Looks like he never showered like ever. His pictures weren't this bad. I pretended to text and walked towards the grocery store and asked him to wait out, and I'd get some things my mom asked me to. I just got some packet of noodles and chips and had an opaque bag. Inside I thought of how to best dodge him, and I came out and said, "Sorry, my mom called me. Says there are guests at home, and she wants me back." He said all right and walked away. As soon as he turned the corner of the street, he texted, "Sorry, this will not work out." "Good luck to you." I blocked him without any reply. And after a few months, he did try to contact me from multiple numbers, and his friend's number saying how I understand him. How he always ruins the best things in life, blah blah. I told him if he tries to contact me one more time, whether it's his number or his friends, I will report to the cops him and his friends. Guy 2 over text seemed very boring, but I decided to meet thinking not everyone is a good texter. My mistake to assume that because of what I am about to tell you now. I had mentioned in my profile I want causal dates, or let's see if we vibe, and then we will see where it goes, and dude was very excited to have sex with me. He did text me outright, "So your place or mine?" How many guys have you had sex with / but casual only means sex, right? So I met him, we walked to downtown, had tea together and walked back. Incurious guy, I kept talking about stuff and tried to joke a bit, and he didn't laugh, just kept saying, "Yes, you're right," to whatever I said. No contribution in the conversation except when I explicitly asked questions about him and kept poking him with follow-up questions, because he literally would not go beyond of "No, never been there." Yes, I did that once. I asked candidly about his previous relationships, and he then opened his mouth to be frank with me. He never had a GF. Ever. So in college, bachelor studies, he got close to a girl once, but not true feelings or anything. His sister was upset that he was getting close to a girl. He basically said by that time he was desperate to kiss a girl and lose his virginity because all his friends were done. But he didn't. Now master studies. He is trying to meet girls but haven't had any luck, like no luck. But he is glad he met someone like me who talks and wants to know about him. And after the walk he is like, "Should we kiss?" No, seriously, why do I keep meeting up with such guys in life? I said no. Him, then when should we kiss? Me, I'd rather know someone better first than kissing them. We parted ways the same place we met, a bus stop close to a park behind my house, and bid good night. He never offered to walk me back or know if I reached safe. I ghosted him. I saw him a couple of times afar in campus, and never talked. A few times on the bus, and I pretended to be on the phone to ignore him. He texted me after 4 to 5 months, and I didn't reply. When I just finished college, I was living in a one-bedroom townhouse/split. I met a guy on Plenty of Fish, and at that time I wasn't exactly smart about my online digital footprint. Not like I've really changed, but at least now I'm not as ridiculous. Anyways, he seemed like a decent guy. He was really good looking, said he had a good job, nice teeth, don't judge me, and looked like he cared about his personal health. All things I would typically look for in a guy. I'm not a shallow human, but I like to be presentable, and if I'm with someone I would like them to care about being presentable in a business environment also. After about a week of chatting online, we agreed to meet. We met at a restaurant downtown, which was really far from where I lived. When I got there I noticed him standing at the door. We sat down to eat, and the evening went great. At the end of the date we said bye, and I got into my car and began to drive away. I realized right away that he was following me. Because of the distance to my house, I wasn't immediately scared because it's a big city. Maybe he'll turn off the freeway. He didn't. My exit was coming up, and I decided not to take it. I kept driving. I circled the entire city on the freeway, and he stayed right behind me. I was starting to panic a bit, so I decided to go to my friend's house instead of mine, and when I pulled out the exit I noticed he didn't. So I had a little bit of a moment to breath, and decided, okay, screw it, I'll just go home. I took the off-ramp back onto the freeway, and began going back to my exit. I got home and showered, and was getting ready for bed, and I started feeling dumb because was that really him? Am I overreacting? Do I ask him if he was following me? Just a number of things were racing through my overactive imagination. Or so I thought. I decided I was going to message him, and just say, had a good time, good night. And when I started typing, all of a sudden a message came through to my phone of a picture of my car outside my house. I nearly died. My heart jumped out of my chest. I started shaking. I didn't know what to say. And he texts me and says, "I didn't know you lived across the street from me. I've met my neighbors, and not once have I ever met him. There's a huge apartment complex kitty corner to my townhouse, so maybe that's where he lived, I don't know." I popped up and went to look outside, and there he was, just standing there outside like he was waiting for me. I opened the door and he asked if he could come in, and if I wanted to still hang out. I told him I was exhausted, and I'd rather just crash out as it had been a long day. The next morning I woke up to go to work, and my windshield had been smashed. My car was keyed, my back 2 tires were slashed. And as I was noticing the damage to my vehicle, the guy comes out of his car with 2 coffees and is like, "Oh, I thought I'd surprise you with a morning coffee." So again, I'm like freaked out. I called the cops and reported the damage to my vehicle. This guy offered to drive me, and something in my gut was like, "Don't get in that car." So I called my boss, told them the situation, and explained I wasn't going to be there until after the police came. This guy just hung out the whole time, BTW. When the police finally got there, this guy was acting really suspicious. He walked away and was like hiding on the other side of his car. I filed the report. The police basically said, "Hope you have insurance," and we're on their way to leave. They pulled around the corner, and all I heard was the siren on the cops' lights turn on, and the cops scream, "Freeze, put your hands in the air, and get down on your knees." I look, and the cops got his gun drawn at this guy, and this dude's like on the ground getting arrested. I spoke with the cop after he got into the back, and he explained he was wanted for stalking, breach of probation, assault with a deadly weapon, fraud, and aggravated sexual assault. I was shook. It took me a couple days to get over the hypothetical situations that could have happened. About a week later, I was on my way out the door to work, and guess who was sitting in my driveway? We live in Canada, so essentially you're released on conditions until you go to jail. I told him I was late for work, but that I'd call him when I was done work. I never went to work that day. I went and found a new apartment on another area of the city. I also changed my phone number and hired my friend's husband and his friends to go pack my apartment up and move it to their place for a month, and then move it to my new place because I was so scared this dude would follow them while moving. So that's my horror story of the first time I used plenty of fish. Not me, and not exactly a first date, but here it goes. My friend went out of town for a work conference and ended up meeting a woman. They hit it off instantly, and he spent the rest of the weekend with her, but had to fly home Sunday afternoon. She tried to get him to stay a few extra days, and, while he was into it, told her he couldn't, but they made plans for him to return a month or so later. So he gets home and is telling us about her. How she was great, how the connection was immediate, and the spark was something unique. We were stoked for him. Then he flew back to her a few weeks later. From the moment the plane landed, it was a nightmare. He started a group chat at the airport. She picked him up and was in a mood from jump, treating him like they were already in that bickering couple phase. They get in her car, and he's texting the chat, and she goes silent. He tells her he's just letting his friends know he got to town all right. She continued the silent treatment. They popped in somewhere for lunch, and she's still annoyed. He gets a beer, and she's criticizing his drinking habits, even though they met at a bar. They make it back to her place, and my friend expects things to chill out. But no. She gets mad that he's not taking his clothes out of his bag and hanging them up in the closet, which gives her the impression he doesn't want to be there. My friend, exhausted with the 180 from the person he thought he knew, lays into her. She tells him she's upset because it took him too long to get back to visit, and he didn't commit to staying long enough. My friend calms her down and tells her to start the shower, and he'll join her just as soon as he takes a work call. She seems happy enough, and off she goes. The minute he hears her get in the shower, he starts getting his bag together. Once he has everything ready, he starts to head out. The way he explained her apartment was that it was small with a heavy front door. There was no way he could open it without her hearing it from the shower. So he made plan B, jump from the second-story balcony. Don't believe me? He group video chatted us first. I'm at work, talking to a colleague, when I see a phone call from him. "Okay, Mark, but you need to go the fuck away because I have to take this call." I answered, and the first thing I see is my friend mentally judging the distance from the balcony to the ground. He fills me and our other friend in. She's going to end up Kathy Bates Jimmy Misery style if I stay. I need to get the fuck out of here now. We get to watch him jump and crash into the grass. He grabs his bag, and he starts running down the street. I have never laughed so hard in my life. Maybe 5 minutes passes, and she starts calling and texting him. She knew what was up. My friend walked to a Target somewhat nearby, Ubered to the airport, finagled some sort of discounted voucher or rebate, to get an immediate return flight and waited it out at the airport. It was awesome to experience his dilemma in real time. I have a few of my favorite OkCupid horror stories to share with you. 1. A girl messaged me about 6 months ago. She had a decent profile, mentioning going to film school in NYC, along with a love for comics. I was intrigued. Beyond that, she was really cute and 5 feet 7 inches, which was perfect for a 6 feet 4 inches man such as myself. After a few messages back and forth, I asked her out on a date in which she mentioned she was nervous about meeting in person. The fears were completely reasonable. She had a friend who had a terrible experience with online dating, taking to a guy who ended up being a 40-year-old man that sent fake pictures. I agreed that we can text for a few weeks until she was comfortable. Once she became comfortable, she asked to meet at a public place, just in case I was not who my profile said I was. When we met, she was easily 40 pounds heavier than her pictures, about 3 to 4 inches shorter, and that was only the beginning of the lies. She was not currently going to film school, but instead planned on going once she finished community college. Furthermore, at 23 she had been in community college since she was 18, and it wasn't because she was working during this time to afford it. She was currently living with her parents, and was unable to drive to the date. Her parents had to drive her. After the date, she continued to message me for 2 months, and is the reason I now only give out a Google Voice number to my dates, understandably. There is nothing wrong with going back to school, or even living with your parents during a hard time. This, however, was not the case. She was neither looking for work, nor had immediate plans to move on with her life. 2.1 of my dates knew they had Scrabble at this bar, and decided to play board games there. She was so into the game, that she had not interest in talking and getting to know each other. Just play Scrabble. The game went on forever, and I seriously just wanted to go home by the end of the night. Sure, Scrabble may be fun for some people, but not on a first date at Prohibition Bar, especially when you refuse to talk between turns. Afterwards, she talked about how she cuts her own hair, her daddy issues, and how she sees a psychiatrist for image issues. 3. I am at a wine bar with a date. We are having a good conversation, and the date was going decently. Not bad, not great. After a drink, she starts slurring her speech a bit, and then says, "Can I ask you a serious question? Are you gay?" After explaining that I am not even bisexual, she then say, "Well, I am not that into metrosexual men." This girl proceeded to message me 5 more times on OKC to see if we can hang out as friends. 4. Yenenendi, my favorite. My first date on OKC got drunk and vomited at a bar. When I offered to walk her home, she refused, saying she does not want some stranger from the internet knowing where she lives. I even offered to walk her a few blocks from her place, in which she still refused. I am not going to leave some drunk girl, no matter how obnoxious, stranded in the middle of downtown SJ, so I just walk around town with her for 3 hours. During that time, she talked about her pet rats and her scoliosis. After she sobered up, I let her drive home, in which she then texted me the next day to say I did not feel a romantic connection. Bear with me. It gets good towards the end. This happened a couple years ago. The receptionist at one of my clients talked/begged me into meeting her best friend, who just moved to LA from Phoenix. She swore up and down we were perfect for each other. I checked out her OKC profile, chatted back and forth for a few days, then talked to the mystery girl once on the phone, and we decided to meet for dinner and drinks at a local bar and grill after her shift. She's a nurse. Was over on a Tuesday night. We meet. She's an adorable, petite, dirty blonde with glasses and freckles. Totally my type. I could tell she was a bit nervous. We sit down and order drinks. She downs her apple martini in less than 5 minutes, orders another and apologizes, stating she wants to loosen up a bit because she's nervous since her friend talked me up so much. Which is odd since I don't even know her friend that well at all. Fast forward a bit. She ended up having 2 martinis before the appetizers came, 2 more in between appetizers and 3 more during dinner, and 1 more right before the check came. Total martinis had by a 5'3" girl in a 3-hour period. 7. Surprisingly, the conversation during this period did quite well. The trouble came as we were about to leave, and she decided to use the restroom before we hit the road. She fell twice on the way, and once on the way back. Since she was clearly hammered, I offered to drive her home and give her some cash for a cab in the morning to pick her car up. She agreed but declined the cash. Mind you, it's nearing midnight, and I have to get up at 5:30 for work. As we are driving toward her apartment, it becomes apparent that, Combined with her drunken state, and the fact she's lived in the valley for less than 2 weeks, she forgot her address and how to get herself home. We drive around North Hollywood and Studio City for an hour trying to remember her street or any local landmarks. This fails and I'm getting tired/frustrated. I offer to let her stay at my place. Nothing weird. She can crash on my bed and I'll take the couch. She's okay with this. On my way back to my place, she attempts to throw up out the car window, but doesn't realize the window was never open in the first place. Vomit everywhere. Now she's crying and apologizing like crazy. I get her to my apartment, carry her up the 3 flights of stairs, and toss her on my bed. She's out cold. I go downstairs and spend another 40 minutes cleaning out my car, and finally get to sleep on my couch around 2 a.m. Around 4:30 a.m. I'm awoken by a shrill scream coming from my bedroom. I run in wearing just my boxers, flip the light on. The girl pauses for a second, looks at me and screams more, backs into a corner, and throws my nightstand lamp at me while yelling, "Who the fuck are you?" It takes a minute for me to calm her down and explain the situation and remind her of our night. It eventually all comes back to her. She starts crying and apologizing. After I calm her down some more, I give her a ride home. During our ride home, the awkward silence is only broken by her apologizing while sobbing, telling me how to get to her place, and then asking if we hooked up. I told her we didn't, and that I'm not the creepy type to take advantage of girls in her condition. She replied with something along the lines of, "Oh, okay. I'm not typically a lush, and I'm definitely not a slut. I was just super nervous and didn't know my limit last night. You seem great, and I hope we can see each other again." I ended up saying, sure, just to avoid any more awkwardness, gave her an in-car hug, and said goodnight. The next day, while slothing around work in a meeting, she called. It went to voicemail. Immediately she called again. Twice. Finally she left a voicemail. Said voicemail went something like this: "So I was thinking about what I asked you on our way home last night in regards to us hooking up. And I'm kind of curious as to why you didn't try anything with me. Is it because you think you're too good for me, huh? Mr. Big Shot LA guy? Well, whatever. I'm not a slut and don't sleep around, but you missed a shot at some awesome sex last night. So whatever." Click about half an hour later, while I'm still in the meeting, she calls and leaves another voicemail. This time crying. "I'm sorry about what I said earlier. I'm just having trouble adjusting to a new place. I'm homesick. You seem real great. Please call me back and please don't ignore me. Please. I'm sorry." Needless to say, I didn't call her back. Her friend, the receptionist, apologized profusely the next time I saw her. We didn't talk much about it after that. TLDR, blind date and new girl in town gets blackout drunk on first date. Pukes all over my car. Can't drive or remember way to her apartment. Stays at my place in my bed while I sleep on my couch. Wakes up at 4 a.m., doesn't know where she is, freaks out, screams, throws lamp at me. I calm her down, take her home. She calls me 4 times the next day, leaves voicemail scathing me for not taking advantage of her. Calls back shortly after and apologizes, asks to hang out again. I never speak to her again. I, 22, female, almost 23. Took a long break from online dating after having a traumatic experience with another guy I met online in 2019. I recently decided to give Hinge a try since I heard it's the better dating app, and after a couple days I matched with a guy, 22, male. He asked for my number that night, and we switched to talking on there. The first week we were talking, he asked me to FaceTime, and I was super excited about it. I was waiting for hours and hours just for him to text me around midnight saying he was hanging out with his friends, but he could talk later, just for him to cancel because he got too drunk. I felt really sad and disappointed, but my friends told me to try cutting him some slack since we barely knew each other. He also mentioned FaceTiming 2 times after that, but we never did. We continued texting, and he eventually asked for my Instagram. I'm personally the kind of person that likes frequent/consistent texts, but he frequently went hours and hours without texting back and rarely ever texted before noon, which always made me anxious. I had learned from a previous experience to not put all my eggs in one basket, but I did it for him because he was very attractive. He asked me out after a week of talking, but we never set a date, and he was busy that weekend, so he put it off until next week. However, the next week he put it off again because he made plans with his friends and failed to let me know earlier. I kept giving him so many chances because I so badly wanted him to be a good thing, and because I thought he was very good looking. I had many gut feelings that I shouldn't still be talking to this guy because deep down I knew I didn't like how he made me feel, since he disappointed me and made me sad so many times before we even met in real life. However, we were then able to choose a date for the following week. The night before he said he could pick me up, but I'm very cautious, so I said I could drive myself. He also asked if I wanted to go to his house afterwards, but I declined. During our date, he acted like a huge frat guy. He was vaping and kept insisting he was trying to quit. He told drug stories and was generally very unhinged and inappropriate, but I tend to overshare sometimes too, so it didn't alarm me too much. Afterwards, he offered to drive me to the restaurant, and I almost said yes, but I told him I could drive myself. At the restaurant, he told me a story about another girl he met online that was very forward sexually, and it made him uncomfortable, making me think he was shy and wasn't too pushy sexually. He would also talk about how he loved his mom/family and was best friends with his sister, so it made me assume he was very nice and respectful to women. He told a lot of stories and used vocabulary that the average person would have felt uncomfortable by, but I was letting so many red flags slide because he was very attractive and I wanted a good-looking boyfriend so bad. He told me he was getting out of a situationship that he ended 3 to 4 weeks ago, around the time we started talking, but I didn't have to worry about it. He said due to this he was actually looking for a friend, but he also was looking for a relationship, but he did like me. The last story he told me was how his previous relationship ended. He said they were fooling around, but she said no, but he thought it was foreplay because of what he's seen in porn. He said she called him a sexual assaulter, and he thought that was ridiculous, and he kept insisting that wasn't his intention and that he was a genuine guy. Once I realized exactly what he was trying to tell me, I was in disbelief of what was happening, and I felt so dumb that I kept giving him chances and let so many red flags slide just because of how attractive he was. After that, I said I had to go home, and before I got into my car, he said, "Hey, listen, I'm so sorry if I made you uncomfortable." I called my friends and was ranting to them for the rest of the night about it since I was so shocked and disgusted. We didn't text each other that night, and I also noticed he unmatched me on Hinge, so I couldn't even report him. The next day I texted him simply saying I didn't think it was going to work out, and I didn't think we should talk anymore since I didn't want to be confrontational. He was cool about it, and we both unfollowed each other on Instagram. I've been pondering if I should post publicly about him and show his name/photos to warn other girls, but I'm scared he'll find out and go after me. I'm still very in shock/denial and disgusted over this whole thing, and I feel like an idiot because I ignored so many red flags and kept talking to him just because of his looks. It's also frightening to think about how he asked me to go to his house, and how I almost said yes to getting in the car with him. At the very least, I'm glad he outed himself on the first date, and I didn't find out the hard way. If he didn't tell me that, I'd probably have stayed friends/still be talking to him. For this to be my first experience after taking a break from dating for over 3 years, it has me feeling discouraged and traumatized/put off by men all over again. A year after my divorce, I finally felt ready to jump back into the dating pool. And let me tell you, dipping my toe in was equal parts nerve-wracking and exciting. I hadn't been on a proper date in years, and swiping through profiles felt like some strange, modern game show where the prize was either true love or a lifetime supply of awkward small talk. But after weeks of scrolling, liking, and dodging unsolicited pictures I didn't ask for, I matched with a guy who seemed, well, perfect. He checked all the boxes: great job, sharp sense of humor, easy on the eyes. Best of all, he was also just getting back into dating after a long-term relationship, which made me feel like we were on the same page. We traded funny messages, had a few phone calls where the conversation flowed naturally, and soon enough, we decided to meet in person. The first date was solid, coffee and pastries at a quiet cafe. He was charming, polite, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. By the end of it, I felt that rush of excitement I hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. The second date was even better, drinks and live music at a rooftop bar. He looked good, smelled good, and managed to be both funny and flirty without trying too hard. I started to think this might actually go somewhere. By the third date, I was feeling hopeful, like cautiously optimistic. Text your friends the details in case he turns out to be the one kind of hopeful. He made reservations at a bistro downtown, the kind of place with dim lighting, tiny candles on the tables, and jazz softly playing in the background. It had date night vibes written all over it. We settled into our corner table, ordered a bottle of wine, and started flipping through the menu. Everything was going great, easy conversation, plenty of laughter, and the kind of effortless chemistry that made me forget how nerve-wracking dating had felt a few weeks earlier. I was just starting to relax when it happened. Out of nowhere, a piece of bread flew past my head. Yes, bread. Like a crusty baguette that had somehow become a projectile. It hit the floor with an audible thud, and for a split second, I thought maybe a waiter had just dropped a basket. But when I turned around to see where it came from, my stomach dropped. Sitting a few tables away was a woman who looked like she'd been waiting for this moment all night. She had this wild, unblinking stare and a glass of wine clutched so tightly in her hand I was sure it would shatter. She was glaring directly at us, specifically at him, and I could tell instantly this wasn't some random stranger. I turned back to him, and his face said it all. Pale, wide-eyed, the look of a man who knew exactly what was about to unfold. "Who is that?" I whispered, even though I already knew the answer. He let out a shaky breath. "My ex." "Oh." I tried to stay calm. After all, exes happen. But exes don't usually happen like this. Before I could ask any follow-up questions, she stood up and stormed over to our table. The restaurant, which had been buzzing with quiet conversation and the clinking of silverware, suddenly went silent. People were starting to stare. "You really moved on that fast?" she hissed, completely ignoring me and locking eyes with him. A year together, and this is what I get. I wanted to shrink into my chair. He tried to keep his voice down, muttering something about how they'd been broken up for months, and it wasn't like that. But she wasn't having it. "Oh, it is like that," she said, her voice rising. "I hope your little rebound here knows what she's getting into." And then, because apparently bread wasn't enough, she reached for the butter knife. For one terrifying second, I thought she was actually going to throw it, but she just slammed it down on the table so hard it rattled the wine glasses. By now, a waiter had swooped in to try and defuse the situation, but she wasn't backing down. She fired off a few more insults, called him a liar, and then pointed at me and said, "And you? Good luck." With that, she grabbed her purse, downed the rest of her wine like it was a shot, and stormed out. The entire restaurant was silent, except for the faint sound of jazz still playing in the background. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or pretend to be invisible. My date buried his face in his hands, clearly mortified. "I'm so sorry," he said, finally looking up at me. I swear, I had no idea she'd be here. And maybe he didn't. Maybe it was just one of those fluke moments where the universe decides to keep you humble. But honestly, I was too overwhelmed to analyze it. I looked around at all the curious faces watching us, raised my hand, and said, "Check, please." The 3 worst first dates I've ever had were blind dates set up by a friend of mine. In hindsight, I think she was trying to make me feel better after a brutal breakup, but they only became funny after the fact. My favorite was the yummy margarita guy. We exchanged photos and wrote emails, and he seemed really great. Okay, so maybe the photo was like a 100 by 100 thumbnail cropped of just his face. And well, he did mention going out for margaritas like 3 times in one email exchange. But still, I wanted to get out for the day. We planned on walking the spring street fair that was happening where the local restaurants and breweries show off their food and drinks. Awesome. I was going to eat good food and drink enough to make spending all the money on the good food okay. I was about 2 minutes away when I texted him and told him I was trying to find a parking spot. He told me he found one and was going to stand in it until I got there. Yes. I pull up to where he told me to meet him. I see a stout, chubby, balding white guy wearing the most ill-fitting clothes standing in a parking spot. Oh God, my date must have left and someone else snagged the spot. Oh fuck, he's waving at me. Why is he standing like that? I pull up and roll my windows down. I take a good look, as best as I can with the sun bouncing off his shiny forehead, and muster my best hey. I finally park, get out of my car, and we did the awkward handshake or hug dance. He told me I looked even more exotic in person, and he's glad we both look like our photos. Haha, no. You lied to me with your picture, sir. You lied. We start walking in the direction of the street fair, and that's when I noticed he's wearing the most detailed FUBU jeans ever. Stitched designs on the pockets, up and down the legs, and wait, who the fuck is still wearing FUBU in 2009? Then I notice his oversized FUBU striped polo and the giant sweat patch on his lower back. In my gaze I could see movement being made out of the corner of my eyes, and it turns out he has a giant paper towel roll with him, and he's wiping the sweat from his forehead and neck. I mean, yes, sure, it was hot as fuck that day, but the amount of sweat that was coming off on those towels could end the California drought. I made a decision right there to just continue the date. I drove all the way down here, and I've always wanted to try the food. Apparently, he had other plans. As we were wandering around, he kept asking out loud, "Where are all the yummy margaritas at? I see all this brouhaha beer, but no margaritas." He wouldn't stop long enough for me to grab food, and would complain loudly if a vendor was serving a fucking margarita. To shut him up, I found a little Mexican bar about 3 blocks from the fair that served margaritas. We go in, we sit down at the bar, and he happily orders a strawberry margarita and proceeds to baby the fuck out of that drink. I order a Guinness and proceed to down it. Okay, this is the time to escape. He's got his margarita, but he won't shut the fuck up about how good it is. What do? What can I say? I interrupt his margarita monologue to tell him my dog needed to take a shit and that I needed to get home to walk him. He stops to look at me and asks if he could finish his margarita before we head out. Oh God, he thinks this is a group thing. Abort. Abort. I slapped my cash on the bar and told him it couldn't wait. My dog needed to shit and needed to shit badly. I ran out of there as quick as I could, leaving him his drink and his paper towel roll. Later that night, I get an email from him telling me that he had a great time, he hopes my dog is okay, and that he made reservations at a nice seafood place that served the most amazing margaritas ever. My first mistake? Going out with my intern. Rookie move, I know. But in my defense, it started off as one of those situations that didn't feel like a big deal at the time. We'd been working together for a couple of months, and she was smart, funny, and had this laid-back vibe that made her easy to be around. We'd grab lunch sometimes or chat about music while waiting for meetings to start, and I figured asking her to join me at a show wasn't crossing any lines. It was just 2 co-workers hanging out, right? Wrong. The night started off harmless enough. We met at this little dive bar near the venue, had a couple of beers, and swapped stories about terrible bosses and awkward office moments. She told me about the time she accidentally replied all to an email chain, complaining about someone who was, in fact, on the email chain. I told her about the time I tripped over a power cord during a presentation and took the projector down with me. We laughed, and honestly it felt good, easy, like we'd been friends for years instead of just a few months. By the time we got to the venue, the drinks were hitting just right. The band was loud, the crowd was rowdy, and we ended up standing way too close to each other, the kind of close where shoulders brush and no one moves away. Somewhere between the second and third song, she leaned in and said, "You're not as uptight as I thought you'd be." I laughed, but inside I was doing that mental calculation. The one where you weigh whether or not leaning in a little closer is a terrible idea. Spoiler alert, it was. But a couple more beers later, neither of us cared. After the show, we wandered back to her place. It was one of those spur-of-the-moment decisions that felt completely reasonable at the time. She lived nearby, and neither of us wanted to call it a night yet. We ended up in her living room, flipping through records and taking turns picking songs until one of us made the first move. I honestly don't remember who it was, probably her, but maybe me. All I know is that 1 minute we were talking, and the next we were making out like teenagers who'd just snuck out after curfew. We stumbled into her bedroom, shedding clothes along the way, and well, you get the idea. Everything seemed fine, great, even, until it wasn't. Afterward, we were lying there catching our breath when she reached over, grabbed a joint from her nightstand, and lit it. Now, I'm not opposed to a little post-hookup relaxation, but the second she took that first hit, I could tell something was off. Her face changed, eyes darting, jaw tightening, and then she sat straight up in bed like she'd just remembered something important. "I think I'm too high," she said, her voice already wavering. I sat up too, trying to gauge whether this was regular high or emergency high. "You okay?" I asked. "Nope," she said, already climbing out of bed and reaching for her robe. "I need a minute." And with that, she bolted to the bathroom, shutting the door so hard the frame rattled. At first, I figured she just needed to splash some water on her face or talk herself down in the mirror. I waited a few minutes, then a few more. After about 15 minutes, I knocked softly and asked if she was all right. "I'm fine," she called back, but her voice sounded anything but fine. So I waited some more, and waited, and waited. By the time we hit the 1-hour mark, I was starting to wonder if she'd climbed out the bathroom window to escape. I knocked again, this time a little louder. "You sure you're okay?" There was a long pause, and then she finally said, "I think you need to go." I blinked at the door, trying to process what I'd just heard. "Wait, what?" "I'm serious," she said, her voice muffled. "You should go." And that was it. No explanation, no further discussion. Just a disembodied voice telling me to leave. So I did. I gathered my clothes, got dressed in awkward silence, and let myself out of her apartment, trying not to trip over my own feet on the way. I stood outside for a second, wondering if I should text her to make sure she wasn't still locked in the bathroom, but ultimately decided against it. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache and a sinking feeling in my stomach. I grabbed my phone to check for any texts from her, maybe an apology or even just an explanation, but there was nothing. And then Monday rolled around. Walking into the office felt like stepping into a minefield. She was already at her desk when I arrived, typing furiously and avoiding eye contact like it was her full-time job. I tried to play it cool, said a casual hey as I passed by, but all I got in return was a quick nod and a morning. For the rest of the day, we both acted like nothing had happened. No one else in the office seemed to suspect anything, but I felt like every interaction with her was loaded with unspoken awkwardness. It didn't help that every time I saw her, all I could think about was that locked bathroom door and the muffled voice telling me to leave. Over the next few weeks, things slowly settled back into something resembling normal, but there was always this underlying tension that never quite went away. I have one that's more weird than it was terrible. It's a doozy. When I was 19, I was working at a shop in a less traveled part of downtown. It was winter time, and my hometown is dead in the winter, so there was very little foot traffic. I was working alone on a Saturday night. A cute backpacker guy came into the shop. At the time, I considered myself to have hippie leanings, so he was just my type. Yeah, I had one long skirt and wore jewelry I bought from street vendors. That's as far as that went. Totally pretentious and naive. We got to chatting, and he said he'd just gotten into town and was looking for suggestions on fun things to do. I directed him to the nearest nightclubs on the next block. He left, and I went about my business. He came back some time later to tell me that the clubs weren't really his scene, and invited me to hang out with him at his grandparents' place, which was on a lakefront property. I agreed to it like an idiot, all excited and flattered that this hot scruffy guy had asked me out, thinking it was romantic or some shit. Well, I go there after I close the shop down at 10 p.m. I get to the address he had given me, and it's a nice enough place, but there are no grandparents to be seen. I wondered briefly if he had just broken into some random property, but he seemed familiar with a few key things. I stayed. He made me craft dinner, which was pretty cool. Then we sat inside and he began talking about all the occult/Illuminati symbols on the American dollar bill, that everything in the US is a giant conspiracy run by them, etc., etc. At this point, I was feeling uncomfortable. He told me about some experience he had in Tofino, a small, hippie-ish town on Vancouver Island, where he was on the beach and apparently saw hippies coming out of the forest who drew a big circle in the sand that they danced around and chanted in by moon/candlelight. Honestly, this one could have been true. He told me about some spooky supernatural experiences he had in Stanley Park in Vancouver that apparently cemented his belief in ghosts. Then, the kicker, he told me he could see auras. So far, all of this could be just some hippie/free spirit guy talking about his beliefs, yes? But he said that he believed that he was descended from the wizard Merlin since Merlin had a gray aura, and so did he. He believed he was a wizard and had some kind of powers, and that's why all these weird things kept happening to him. I had to go. I told him I had to work early. Then I get outside, and it was the first snowstorm of the year. Hooray! I could barely get my car up the driveway, but finally did. No way was I going back inside or considering staying the night. At the time, I thought he was weird, but was more worried about driving in the snow or waking up my parents after being out so late. He texted me once or twice after that, but I kept telling him I was busy. I should have known better. Way better. That was so dangerous. Nobody knew where I was, so I was extremely lucky that he was harmless. When I tell the story to friends, they laugh about my date with a wizard, but I shudder to think of how dumb I was. It's more about that than about some kooky dude. Matched with a gorgeous woman, and we got to chatting straight away. We had great convo and no trouble genuinely making each other laugh. She was very responsive and seemed super interested, so was I. So unsurprisingly, plans for a date quickly ensued. So far so good. This was just after the last round of lockdowns had ended where I live. You needed to book just about everywhere, and places were being strict about charging for canceled bookings and allotting 2-hour table time limits. Took the risk and booked for drinks. I show up on time, waiter takes me to the table. I order a drink and chill thinking she's going to be a little late based on the last TXT exchange. 15 minutes and I get a text saying she's struggling to find parking. Not a problem, no stress, see you when you get here, I respond. 15 minutes later the follow-up, I'm just around the corner, TXT lands. At this stage I've finished the drink I ordered, and the waiter keeps coming round, reminding me I've got limited time on the booking, and asking if I want another drink or to order food. I turn down the drink, not wanting to be half cut, when slash if my date shows, and don't order food either. Waiter looks very annoyed. I'm thinking about settling the bill and getting on my merry way. 15 minutes later, a total of 45 minutes late, date finally shows. I'm annoyed, but she walks in looking smoking hot, looking even better than her very attractive pics, and apologizes profusely, which lowers the irritation to a simmer that is quickly forgotten. She did make a remark about how she had to take time to get pretty for me, that kinda irked me, but again smoking hot, and besides that quip actually quite charming, so I let it slide. My date orders a cocktail, I get a beer, and she downs the thing before I've gotten a quarter of the way through my beer, and immediately orders another one, and slams that one down before I can finish my beer. Remember, she drove to this date. Waiter does his time, keep thing looking even more annoyed, and we collectively realize not enough time to eat, so I settle the bill, and my date, and I decide to go elsewhere. At this point, I'm pretty much sober, but I can see slam him down cocktail Sue is in no state to drive. Turns out she parked her car about a block away, which begs the question why it took her so long to get there if she was parked around the CNR. But Waitev's issue now is she can't drive, and will 100% get a ticket if she leaves her car where it is. I'm a little amused at her plight, but I offer a solution. Find a long-term park for the car, then it won't an issue for the evening. She agrees this is sensible, but she's definitely over the limit, so I drive her car into an overnight-type parking lot with a reasonable weekend rate, and think crisis averted. Little did I know what would follow. We kick on to a few other spots round town, and by this point the city is heaving, and we're progressively both getting drunker and drunker, but having an absolute blast. End up at club-type spot dancing, getting handsy and lip-locking with each other. Never had a first date quite so raucous, but this woman is hilarious and good times are being had by all. Then things suddenly turn. She takes a phone call, her face visibly darkens, and she's absolutely seething. Apparently it's someone she did a favor for that turned on her, and she says, I can be the sweetest, kindest person in the world, but if you cross me I'll destroy you, flushed face. We're both quite drunk, but I can see this line of talk ain't leading to anything good, so I try to change the subject to no avail. She's ranting and getting more and more worked up. People start to stare and I hold her hand and gently try to calm her down. She flips the script and yells, don't fucking touch me. Mind you, we'd been a hell of a lot more intimate already by then than hand holding, so I'm completely thrown. Time freezes as literally everyone turns to look at what must look like an abusive spouse me. Thankfully she spots the look of shock/horror on my face, quickly grabs my hand, apologizes, and tries to snuggle into me. I'm deafened by the alarm bells ringing in my head, and all I can think about is how to pull the pin on this date ASAP. I say I'm leaving, get up, walk out, she chases after me. She's now beside herself, emotional, and I say we're clearly both way too drunk and we should end the date. I offer to pay for her Uber home, and she mutters something about getting a hotel room for the night, as she needs her car first thing in the morn. I tell her that that's a good idea, but that I won't be joining her in the hotel room. I'm going home, thanks very much. She then flies into a rage, and demands I help her get her car from parking garage because she's too drunk to do it. I'm like, lady, I'm just as drunk as you, no goddamn way I'm getting behind the wheel of anything right now. Besides, you don't need your car if you Uber home, or get a hotel room. She calls me every name in the book, and I walk away, call an Uber, go home, laughing to myself about my date with Satan's little helper. I receive a barrage of abusive TXTs and attempts at emotional blackmail. How can you just leave me like this, which I ignore. Get home, turn my phone off, and crash. Next morning I wake up to a video message from her. She went and got her car and drove it home, y'all. The recording was her gunning it down the highway while filming and taunting me. Sweet baby Jesus, what is wrong with you? Was all I could reply. About 6 hours later she's blowing up my phone, apologizing, saying how she's embarrassed and ashamed, got too drunk, and isn't normally like this. I tell her she's playing with fire with what she did, and that she could have in a moment destroyed her life, or worse, someone else's, with her craziness. She agrees. I stop talking to her. Really hope she got help, but yeah, this is the craziest date I've ever been on. Long, but I got this courtesy of OkCupid. I was 24 and from school, had been messaging this cute girl who could actually hold a conversation really well, so after I got home in December we decided to meet up. 7:00 p.m. Show up at her place. She isn't 120 pounds heavier than her picture, doesn't have a beard or Adam's apple, and hasn't axe murdered me yet. Chemistry is great, and we actually start making out before I pull out of my parking space. So far so good. Okay Cupid, you da bomb. 7:15 in the car. Things are fine. She's talking a lot about her modeling job, which is cool. Just finished finals in med school. Anything that isn't an enzyme or nerve circuit is welcome. 7:30 arrive at ice rink and race each other inside. This is fun. Literally sprint in to see who can get ice skates first. 7:35 inside, and she's still going about her local modeling career and all the free things the vendors and designers give her. Thrifty cool. She hasn't asked anything about me, but whatever. She's cute, and I don't think she has a penis. 8:45, been skating for a while. I now know about the process of applying runway makeup, the time constraints and approximations of changing outfits depending on the number of pieces, and how to adjust hip tilt and swing during a catwalk if your clothing piece is top-heavy versus has a long train. I now know every cost approximation of at least 12 different clothing pieces from 3 designers I have never heard of. 8:50, she can't talk if she's eating. I suggest we get food. I don't know the area, so she inquires the first thing about me of the night. Yes, I do like Mexican. Personal thought, Mexican like tacos, should be casual and nice for a first date. 9:00, we arrive at the place. This is not Taco Bell or Chipotle. 40 feet high wooden vaulted ceilings with hanging sheer fabric for ambience, and the swankiest fucking bar I've never seen. I read Cristal on the neck of the display bottles propped about. Isn't that the shit rappers sing about? 9:03 sitting down. She's been bragging for a bit that despite being a model, she has never done cocaine. Waitress gives me a warm, moist hand towel to wipe off my hands as I sit down. I'm wondering if I'm in a strange music video. Fuck, the prices are steep. I'll just have a soda and a salad. She knows everything on the menu by name and what it should be paired with. She's been here a few times. I wonder if with other guys. 9:30, I would really like some cocaine. 10:20, Michael Kors ain't got shit on me for knowledge of the fashion industry. 10:30, I have no idea what she ordered, but the bill is $105 plus tip. She asks if we should go and I say yes. She makes no attempt to pull out her wallet, so I bite the tab, trying to conceal my pissed-ness. Should have ordered more than one drink. 10:40, not too impressed with the date, but I walk her to the door. She asks if I want to come in. I'm not used to dating after 2 long relationships, but I know this is a good sign, and I get excited and accept. So in we go. 10:41, I meet her mother, in a bathrobe, completely unfazed by my presence. She asks if I know how to fix a light socket. 10:47, light socket is fixed. 10:50 in her room, score. I've seen this in movies before. 11:10, she has taken me through every lotion and perfume and tin of makeup and brush on her vanity, and told me the brand, the list price, and how much she actually got it for. 11:20, she is almost finished telling me the brand, location of purchase, and price of every shirt, skirt, pair of pants, and jacket in her closet. She is upset that her friend stole a bracelet from her 2 weeks ago. She wonders if I would help her look for it. Haven't gotten laid in a long time, yes. 11:35, she is literally crying, with tears down her cheeks, because I could not find the stolen bracelet behind, under, in her dresser/vanity/bathroom/bed/closet/nightstand/carpet. If it was stolen, why did she ask me to look for it in her room? 11:40, she has stopped crying, and suggests we watch a movie. Good, I need to mentally check out for a minute. 11:45 pay-per-view, or something, Evil Cabin Zombies in the Woods Dead 27. 12:00 am, extensive commentary on the superior quality of acting begins and ensues for the duration of the movie, but she says she has a knot in her back and wants me to massage it out. I accept this responsibility. 12:30, her shirt is off, and she is dead set on me massaging out a very specific knot on her left shoulder, which does not exist. Whatever. Apparently the special effects of the movie should have won a Tony Award or something, I don't know. 1:00-ish movie ends. My arms are getting sore, been kissing her sensually for a while. Have not been able to get her to A, shut up B, turn over C, actively engage said kissies. 1:03, sequel to Monsters in the Aliens Woods homiciding stereotyped sluts, /cast with Murder 41 begins. My lips are super tingly from the $72 lotion purchased at Macy's 2012 Groundhog's Day sale that I've been using. Still massaging. 1:40, can T feel arms or lips at all? 2:00, she starts participating in the making out stuff and politely tells me that for religious reasons she is saving her virginity until marriage. I completely understand. When it comes to faith beliefs like that, I respect whatever choices you make. Cool, no hassle, and we start fooling around. 2:30, I am excited. I finished her off about 2 or 3 times. I feel like a champ, but I am still completely clothed and have not been touched in any way, shape, or form. As I am still being all sexy-like, I casually say, "What about me?" 2:31, she informs me that the bathroom is right over there and tells me I can take care of myself in the shower. I think I'll just hold it. 2:45, we've been silent, cuddling. Hey, this is nice, I love cuddling, she is comfy, and she's not talking, this is good. 2:50 am, out of silence, she whispers, "I see demons." 2:52 yours are yellow. 2:52 and 12 seconds, I shit myself. 3:00, I learn that my demons are angry, and she is scared of them. Don't worry, I am too. She tells me that she has been exorcised on 2 occasions, and it's helped a lot. I don't inquire as to how much precisely. 3:05, I try to be supportive because this doesn't seem like the kind of thing you just go around telling everybody, and more or less keep my mouth shut. God, I want to try cocaine. 3:10, sleep for her. Another hour of being stiff as a board and scared before I pass out. 9:00, her mother knocks and I, all 6 feet 5 inches 220 pounds of me, attempts to hide under the blankets. Mother comes in and nonchalantly tells her that they are going to a friend's house for dinner. Asks if the bearded guy under the blanket wants to come. I decline. I have to go return some overdue videotapes. 9:15, I leave to return some overdue videotapes. No, we didn't go on a second date. We had a pretty typical, anticlimactic dispersion from each other, and haven't talked since, but it's okay, because apparently my demons can keep me company. Had an OkCupid account for a few years. I would occasionally get on there, mostly when drunk, and message people or check and see if I had messages. One day this decent enough looking girl messaged me, and we got to talking. It was just the usual get to know you kind of stuff, like what do you do for a living and what are your hobbies, etc. I told the girl that I worked night shift at the local Walmart, and at the time it didn't seem that giving her this kind of info would backfire in a way, but I was wrong. We continued messaging for a few days, getting to know each other. She was a school teacher and was a bit older than me. Being that I had a minimum wage job, I didn't really see much of a future there between us, and our conversations were growing a bit stale. So me being the asshole, I decide the best course of action would be to just stop talking to her completely instead of telling her I wasn't interested. A few days go by, and she messaged me a few times, but I, again being an asshole, did not reply. Then I started to get messages that were a bit hostile, asking me why I wasn't talking to her, and why I didn't want to be her friend, and things like that. So I decided to continue ignoring her like the good person that I am. A few more days go by, and then one night at about 2 a.m. while I'm working, a coworker comes up to me and says that some girl was asking for me. At the time I didn't put 2 and 2 together, so I just shrugged it off. Then the following few work nights, my coworkers keep telling me that this girl is coming in looking for me. How she didn't find me by just walking around the store, I don't know. But I finally remember that I had told this girl where I work at. Then the next night she finds me. She had come in with a guy and confronted me about ignoring her on OkCupid. She wasn't being hostile or anything when she asked, so I just told her that I had been busy and hadn't been on in a while. So awkwardly she said, "Well, okay, just message me when you get home." At this point I was a bit freaked out, but I stuck to my ways and did not message her, hoping that she would just leave me alone. But of course this only made things worse. She started showing up looking for me on my days off, asking my coworkers what my schedule was and things like that. The next time I had work, she was there at around 3 a.m., again with a random guy that was different than the last, and again asking me why I had not messaged her. But this time she was a bit more hostile, saying what kind of person does this to someone, and things like that. But I told her the same thing again, that I had been busy and had not gotten on the website in a while. And then as always I continued to ignore her messages. After a few times of hearing that she had shown up looking for me again, and me being afraid of getting stabbed to death by this crazy chick in the parking lot, it finally stopped. She stopped coming to my work and stopped messaging me. In the end, all my hard work and perseverance paid off, and she moved on to stalking someone new. Moral of the story: ignore your problems, and they will eventually disappear. A few years ago, I met up with a somewhat older date, gay man 45 and me being 25. We went for coffee and talked for a couple of hours. It was going well, and the conversation flowed. He invited me back to his place to smoke from his volcano vape, and to fool around if the mood struck. I was down. Volcano vaping is hard to come by and way fun, and this guy was hot and cool. We do our stuff. Another hour or two later, after all was said and done, we're chilling on his couch finishing up a discussion when he gets a knock at his door. He looks confused, clearly not expecting a visitor. He goes and answers the door, in clear view of where I am sitting in the living room, and it's a cute guy who looks to also be around my age. They have a brief exchange that I couldn't hear with low murmuring, and he waves by and closes the door. He turns back and I raise my eyebrow like, "What's up?" And he candidly tells me it's his son's best friend, who he's low-key been sleeping with since he was 21. As I wasn't looking for anything serious, and he knew that through our conversations, he told me about all of the nice, cute guys that have come to him over the years for chill conversation in an open-minded environment with good weed and good sex/head. He makes the first move sometimes, as he did messaging me on Tinder, but he said many guys hit on him first and repeatedly come back to him for feel-good hookups. And I could see why guys enjoy his company and pleasures. He was easy to talk to, didn't hog convo, intelligent, worldly and traveled, open-minded, and is a generous lover as well as giving with his weed. Also super gorgeous and fit. He is previously married, now a bachelor, well off, lives in a nice neighborhood, and his small business he built from the ground up afforded him a nice lifestyle. This guy was awesome and genuine. Glad I got to meet and know him. He told me stories of how he helped some guys by being an ear and supportive with their troubling coming out stories, or abusive homophobic parent stories, and the like, offering places to stay and to help them find employment if needed. I hang out and hook up with him a couple of more times. I eventually move out of state. I come back a year or so later to visit people. I hit him up to see how he's been, and we meet up for coffee. It had only been maybe a year and a half since I had seen him, and my immediate thought was, this man looks rough and like he aged rapidly. Come to find out that he has acute leukemia and doesn't have much time left. He told me he accepts the end and had lived a great life. He has an amazing son, friends, and generally good support around him. Seeing how beat down he looked physically, it was good hearing him speak on those things. It showed the strong character in him that I had gotten to know during our previous times together. We hugged and exchanged some heartfelt words. Such a beautiful, kind, and generous soul. Last I heard, he passed with friends and family around. I'll always remember him. I matched with a girl using the highly successful and scientifically proven dating act we find ourselves currently on. We'll call this match Jen. Jen seemed nice, lolled at my shitty humor, talked good and proper, and asked when we might be meeting up. I suggested a place. She told me when to be there. Onwards, towards my record book we raced. I went into this with zero expectations. It was Tinder, after all. But my choice of a wine bar had been met with overwhelming approval, so I thought maybe something positive might come out of it. Then I saw Jen, and I wanted something to come out of it. She looked substantially better in person than on the app. A reverse catfish, if you will. She had come straight from work and still carried the aura of being focused and unstoppable. Something one would expect from an early 20s NYC girl who was still taking on the world and not yet driven down by defeat or cynicism. Except Jen was 28 and might be interested in me, so it was even better. When she looked over at me, a metamorphosis occurred. Her professional demeanor transformed from a defense attorney honing in on a lead witness error-filled testimony to a child who just received that Christmas puppy they wanted after all other presents had been exhausted. I actually had butterflies in my stomach. Jen and I do a friendly hug, and the first thing I notice is her perfume. I don't know what it was, but she smelled amazing. I get an image in my head courtesy of Hollywood. Us laying in bed post-sex like carefree actors with perfect hair, great lighting, and a lack of towels required to clean up certain bodily fluids. We sit as the server lays down the dinner menus, says he'll be right back, and with a glance at my watch, the clock officially begins, 8:12 p.m. I only know because she had said 8, and I have an irrational fear of being stood up. I needed to verify I was overanalyzing that thought. I'm already a quarter into my drink, having arrived around 8, and needed something to calm myself. Jen peruses the wine list while we engage in the initial pleasantries. How nice she looks, adventures on the MTA to get here, and other small talk. I browse the dinner menu, trying to figure out what I can stomach against my newly arisen, alcohol-resistant jitters. I spot my food of choice, a duck confit salad, and close the menu as Jen flags down our server and orders a Riesling. So far, so good. After her order, she leans into the table, showing some eagerness to talk. Jen has a hell of a smile and brightens up almost on cue as I ask about what she does. The small talk turns to worthwhile discussion as her drink gets dropped off. She tells the server she's ready to order. Apparently, she's already been here and knows what she wants without having to look at the menu. Jen orders a braised pork dish, hands the menu to the server, and sips her wine. Server looks at me, and I order my duck confit salad. Jen, noticeably, has a moment where I think the wine went down the wrong pipe. She recovers fast, and instead of coughing, she's just staring at me with this look of disdain. At this point, I'll mention that my employment consists of public relations for an organization that is not well liked. A day I perform well at work is a day where I am able to be in a very stressful, often hostile, environment while staying together, thinking on my feet, and getting the message out. It happens frequently, and I do my job rather well. I say this not to talk myself up, but to prove just how disastrous the following was. "Eh, salad?" I want to say she bellowed it, but really, I was just so caught off guard it came off as loud as a bullhorn. The server, and myself, not sure what to make of this, look at her with confusion on our faces. His quickly disappears into the menu he's now holding. I reply, "It's got duck in it." Years of experience as an orator are on full display in this crowning moment as my rhetoric resonates across the table. "A salad? Do you know how that will make me look as I'm shoveling braised pork into my mouth?" The server realizes that the table near the bar, which didn't flag him down, suddenly needs his attention, and he'll be right back to see if we need to change our order. Again, I do PR. This is where I work best, on the defensive. I look her dead in the face and say, "Is this a body image thing or something?" She loses it. I can't even comprehend what she's saying, because I'm so mortified at the ignorance I just blurted out. The barrage of fuck yous, assholes, and other obscenities hit their mark, killing my stomach butterflies where they flutter. I start picking up that I'm making her look like a pig, which, consequently, I ask what I just ordered. I am literally speechless. She and everyone else in this place are just staring at me. Maybe yes, I don't know. I finally get the urge to speak up and apologize profusely for making her feel that way. I tell her I will order something else, we can start over, and this is just a silly little... Did you just fucking say, silly? That was it. I was done, preparing for wine to be thrown in my face. Instead, she just stands up, grabs her bag, gives me the finger, and just yells out, "F-U-C-K. You." The restaurant is dead silent as we all watch her leave. She kicks a chair as she was leaving and yelled again as, I assume, she broke her toe. More silence, except for one guy just trying to silence his laughter a few tables away as his companion is saying, "OMG, stop. That's not funny. I would die." I agreed at the time, but now I think it's one of the funniest things that's ever happened to me. I just sat there for a moment and noticed the server standing at my table looking down at me. I glance at my watch, 8:29 p.m. I offer a pleasant smile and ordered the duck confit salad, but please not the braised pork. I was likely dining alone that night. So I had my salad, it was fucking amazing, another glass of my red, her Riesling, and a pretty decent dinner. The server tried to comp 2 of the glasses of wine, but I just tipped him out the comps because he did nothing wrong. I don't know if it was all serious or she was just fucking around with me. She unmatched me sometime after she left, and that was that. So there it is. I wrote quite a bit of this on the train this morning, pre-coffee, post forgetting my Kindle, presently being stuck because of a police investigation at a station. Hope you enjoyed it. My scariest date was when I went out to lunch on New Year's Day with a new guy. A day or two before we went out, we were talking about our NY plans. He was going to be working delivering pizzas. I was going to be at a family party, so neither of us were going to get a NY kiss. So when I got to Noodles and Company for lunch on January 1st, he was ready. He met me at my car, which I didn't like because I was putting the finishing touches on my lip gloss. When I stepped out, he planted a kiss on me, tongue and all. All I could do was laugh. My feet weren't even planted yet. I fell over. During lunch, he proceeded to tell me about a mouth infection he had recently which he'd got from his ex-girlfriend. Then he gave me details about how he had to take pills to produce saliva. To this day I still have no idea what the infection was. Never heard of it before or after. Then he said, "I really want to kiss you again." To which I said no. I went home and looked for mouthwash to gargle but didn't have any. So I grabbed my brother's Skull vodka out of the cabinet and used that. Thankfully, I did not get a mouth infection and I never saw him again. I met a woman on Tinder, and after a few days of messaging back and forth, we decided to go see a movie. She was cute, funny, and seemed normal, or at least as normal as anyone can seem over text. The conversation flowed easily, and I figured why not. A casual movie date sounded low pressure, and honestly, I was just glad to get off the app and meet someone in real life. When we were deciding on the movie, she said it had to be rated PG. I laughed, assuming she was joking or maybe just preferred lighthearted comedies. I even made some sarcastic comment about how we could sneak into an R-rated one afterward if we were feeling rebellious. She didn't really respond to that, but I brushed it off. Some people just like keeping things PG. No big deal. That assumption was shattered the moment she showed up, with a 5-year-old kid in tow. To say I was caught off guard would be an understatement. I stood there in the theater lobby, trying to process what was happening as she waved me over and introduced me to her son like this was the most natural thing in the world. Meanwhile, I was mentally scrolling through our conversations, trying to figure out if I had somehow missed the part where she mentioned she was bringing her kid on our first date. Spoiler, I hadn't. Now, I'm not against single moms. I actually admire them. Parenting is hard, and dating while parenting, even harder. But maybe, just maybe, a heads up that this wasn't going to be a one-on-one situation would have been nice. Instead, I was standing there in my date night outfit, trying to figure out how I'd suddenly become the third wheel on someone's family outing. Before I could even decide how to react, she hit me with, "Oh, by the way, can you grab some popcorn for him? He loves the extra butter." Excuse me? I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that there's a child involved, and now I'm supposed to foot the snack bill? Don't get me wrong, I'm not cheap. If the date had been going well, or if I'd known what I was walking into, I wouldn't have thought twice about buying popcorn. But under these circumstances, it felt less like a date and more like I'd accidentally signed up for babysitting duty. Still, not wanting to make a scene, I bought the popcorn, and a soda, and some candy, because once you're in, you're in. The movie itself was exactly what you'd expect from a PG flick: animated characters, slapstick humor, and just enough plot to keep a 5-year-old entertained. I spent most of it sneaking side glances at her, trying to figure out if she thought this was going well. She seemed completely at ease, laughing at all the jokes and chatting with her kid like this was just another Saturday afternoon. Meanwhile, I sat there sipping my drink, wondering if this was some kind of test to see if I could handle dad mode right out of the gate. After the movie, she thanked me for coming and said her son had a great time. I smiled, nodded, and made some generic comment about how it was fun. Then I got the hell out of there. Later, she texted to say she had a really nice time and hoped we could do it again soon. I stared at my phone for a long time, trying to figure out how to let her down gently. In the end, I told her she seemed great, but I didn't think we were looking for the same thing. Worst date? The one where I ignored basic internet safety protocol 1, the coffee date. So long story, I'm in college on OKC, I get a massage from this guy, and it turns out that we knew each other from high school. He'd been a senior when I was a sophomore, and we'd had a Photoshop class together. So yeah, I remembered him too. And he's all, "I've had a crush on you for such a long time. It's so cool that I found you again." So that's flattering. And he asks if I like to play video games, and I'm like, heck yeah, so he invites me back to his place for video games. Thunder cracks in the background. It was pissing down rain, so he offered to come get me in his car off campus. So I'm like, sure, why not? And he comes and picks me up in this flashy as fuck red 2-seater. And he's every neckbeard stereotype you can imagine. Just a giant guy, both fat and tall, sparse beard all over his chins. I think he kissed my knuckles at some point. Well, I know I'm not exactly stunning either, so I'm like, alright, we're just going to play some video games, it'll be cool. On the way back to his place, he calls his old Subaru, which I vaguely remembered a pussy wagon, and talked about how he had traded up for the flashy red car we were in. This is a turn-off to me because really? If you have a car that runs and could potentially drive a bunch of dogs around, you do not need a flashier car with no cargo or friend space. We're about a half-mile from campus in the nice apartments there, and he brings me up to his studio. He's all, "You want to get high?" takes me to his bathroom, and shows me the most complicated fancy beaker-style bong I had seen up to that date. He bragged that it's like $1,000 top-of-the-line bong. Again with the unimpressive money spending. I had like half a tokay, and he finishes the bowl. We kiss for a bit, and I'm like, alright, I can do kissing. But then he wants to take a shower with me, so I doge out into the room and ask about video games. Weren't we going to play video games? So he follows me, but he's obviously too stoned for Mario Golf. So he asks me to pick a movie, and I choose Life of Brian, because it's a good movie I hadn't seen in a while. So we chill on the couch, and he proceeds to try and basically steal second base, and imply that, hey, he lives in a studio, and his bed is right there. I mean, we could go over there and be comfortable. I played dumb, but then we couldn't see the movie, I said, and he huffed, and went back to tit squeezing. The groping would have been almost okay, but he for whatever reason decided that instead of the classic up and under, to instead go down the neck of my t-shirt. So he's kind of choking me in addition to pinching my nipple in the mistaken impression that this is turning me on. So I tell him to stop, and he gets all huffy, but he stops, so we go back to watching the movie. And then he tries it again, down the neck of the shirt and everything. This happens a couple of times. So then I stand up. I say something like, I think I should home now. As soon as I get up, he bursts into these blubbery, awful tears, and he's trying to tell me something about how it's been so long, and could I just stay? It's raining, he'd totally drive me. And did I have about 350? So about that time I realized he was about 500 feet tall, and from the Paleolithic era. So I smile weakly, tell him, I've had a lovely time, but I really must get going. Cue more and stronger crying, exunt pencil ears. I walked home in the rain, called my sister as I did so in case he followed me, and took what amounts to basically a rape shower to wash the feel of his hands off me. I've been thinking about it today, because I just got back last night from a second date with a guy who seemed like he was mad at me, and decided against a third date for my not being much of a risk taker, and I assume it's because I didn't want to go back to his apartment after our first date. If you're reading this, Drew, and I know you're a Redditor, then now you know why I'm a little wary of being fucking date raped. The only thing that saved me in the above story is that he got himself too high to restrain me effectively. Had he wanted to, he could have wrecked me. Also, despite my high and freaky sex drive, I don't bang people I've known less than 24 hours,